Hello, and welcome to Confident HR Conversations, the podcast designed to help you navigate challenges of communicating in English as an HR professional with confidence and clarity. I'm Alena Konečná, and I'm glad you're here.
When a small company starts growing fast, change becomes a daily reality. And not everyone welcomes it. Some people are excited, others resist, and many just feel lost in the chaos. In this episode, I talk with Šimon Steffal, psychologist and communication expert, about what really happens when organizations go through change. Šimon explains the phases of change, from the early planning and communication to what he calls the aftercare stage, and why most problems start when leaders rush the beginning or skip the end. We also talk about trust as a key currency of change, the importance of being honest about what you can and cannot share, and how HR can help managers handle resistance and change fatigue without losing connection or credibility. Hello, Šimon. Welcome to Confident HR Conversations podcast.
Hello there. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So let's dive into our topic today, which is change in organization. And one thing that you mention often is phases of change. So I would like to ask you, what do you mean by that? What are those phases and why they are important?
The thing is, there are many models that describe that, depending on which particular model from change management you pick. We can, for example, go with the Prochaska and the Clementis model, which is one of the most known stages, 5 stages of change. Sometimes you can see them in a word of described as emotional progress, where we start with a denial phase and the anger phase and whatnot. But we're going to look at more from the perspective of how we can separate it into these individual parts from the systemic approach, which is the first part of the first stage of the change we call the pre-contemplation phase, where no one knows there is a change coming. And there's a small group of people who are contemplating the idea of changing something. Maybe there is a push coming from the outside world. It could be a business model is decaying. We don't know. Something's happening. No one really knows what's happening. There's a couple of people who are aware, and they start building this need for change. Then there's the second stage, which is what we call contemplation stage. This is where we have become aware, and we starting developing some ideas how to battle this uncertainty and what needs to change and why it needs to change and what are some of the ideas that might involve that. Then comes what we call preparation phase, or sometimes in the world it's called determination phase. Like you're already determined that you're gonna push this change forward, right? And the preparation is just about that. We're gathering resources, we're gathering the momentum, we're gathering allies or ambassadors. We're trying to figure out whether there is even a support for that change. Sometimes people are resisting change, even though the change is really needed, and without it we will not survive, or the company we work for will go belly up. And there are people taking action. Some are mapping, some are trying to negotiate, some are trying to sell it to other people. Some are already dictating how this needs to happen, and people get angry at that, or because they don't understand why. Then we have what we call the maintenance phase. This is where the change has already somewhat been pushed into the organization. We're trying to maintain the momentum, as well as the relationships and the needs and the resources needed for the actual change to take place. And finally, we are in the so called action phase, where we are observing whether that change has indeed modified people's behavior or not. We're looking at the modification of the environment. We're looking whether that change is actually sustainable in the long term, because what happens very often, we introduce a change into the organization. We, do everything we could potentially, but we don't realize that by implementing the change, that's not the end of it. We also need to somehow make sure that people accept it and they will do not revert back to the previous styles of behaviors or thoughts. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because if you kind of check the box on or tip your box on your checklist, thinking like, yeah, we're done. And then a half year later, you realize like, wait a minute, people have not moved, have not changed. They have maybe said they will, but they didn't. That gets a little bit messy.
Thank you for walking us through that. So it sounds it's much longer and much more complex process than people might realize. Starting from a phase where, as you mentioned, there's some idea that something might happen, and maybe it will, maybe it won't. Some people are contemplating it, but nobody really knows yet. And then it builds up into this phase which sounded to me quite chaotic. Many people have different expectations. They do different things. And then eventually, if it goes well, we also need to take care of the aftercare. What happened after evaluation, looking at what actually happened and what the impact was, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe the impact was different than what we foresee before.
So just a quick comment there. I would say, like, from my experience, there are two moments where everything goes wrong. The very first one is at the very beginning, where we kind of forget to really think about where we have the needs, resources, energy to even, fathom changing something. And then we fail at delivering the why it needs to happen and what are the consequences of not changing. And then the second is the other pole of it, which is the actual reinforcement of the change and kind of like taking care of it at the end when we actually commit to the change, that it stays on. So these are the two most problematic areas.
So being clear on the why the change is needed, what is expected, and sharing it with whoever, with all the stakeholders.
Sure, absolutely. And there's no doubt there's also this degree of power that needs to be discussed. Because one of the things that we know generates a lot of despair, anger, frustration in people is when they are told that they have some say in how the change will be implemented, but that's not actually true. So there's this false hope of me having some sort of power over things. So we need to be very, very, very clear on what the degrees of power are. So whether we are scoping for opinions, and those opinions will be taken into consideration, whether we are scoping for actual co-authors of the change. And we need to be very clear on the degree of power people have over things. And you need to communicate it clearly to people, because there's nothing worse than saying things will change. We are, taking your input into consideration, and then we did it not in the end. So because then it comes the ultimate question in people's heads: why did we go all through this? What was the point of this? Because it has no impact on anything. This was a waste of time. And I feel either betrayed, or there is definitely impact on trust. And there's one currency you need in change management. It's trust.
So being super clear about the expectations that the people have is important to create this trust. And then that can then help in the later stages when the confusion, when everything kind of gets messy, and you need people to keep trusting you, even though it's a difficult process.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there is another aspect to it, which is to what extent can you be open about things? Sometimes changes are, to a certain degree, capped off for, let's say, different layers of the organizations, right? So you have to be very careful at what you share. But you can be absolutely transparent on what you can share, what you cannot share, and why. And that will go a long way. Because if someone asks about something and you don't want to tell them, or you can't tell them, you have to tell them you cannot tell them, but you have to tell them why you cannot tell them.
Okay.
And go back to the beginning, that if you want to push something that's potentially, I don't think necessarily negative change, but it's a change. So people will have to do things differently, which is always an issue for most people. And you cannot tell them why, or what are the details of it, then at least you have to explain why you cannot tell them.
How can this look like? Could you share an example? Like if there's something that you just cannot share, what could be the reasons?
For example, let me give you a very simple, and that's a real-based example, right? You have a company that's, let's say, size 120, 130 people, you're doing well. And so you actually, someone catches you on the radar and thinks like, this would be good acquisition for our group. So they approach you and you start negotiating potential buyout or takeover or exit or whatever we can call that, right? But these lawyers will tell you like, well, you can't tell anyone. And the deal's already in the oven, but you can't tell people, right? But maybe they're not an idiot. They're not idiots, right? They have noticed something so weird. You are often away. You're staying on business, but whatever. And then they ask you directly. And I really love a response from one of my clients. He's a CTO of a large organization. And he has this rule that anyone can ask absolutely anything. And I will honestly say, if I can or cannot answer that question, if I can, I will answer it. If I cannot answer it, I will tell why. Right? And in this case, this is a real case scenario. He was asked about this, and he would say, I cannot tell you why, because I'm legally blocked at the moment. I signed a contract that says I can't speak about this, but I would like you to trust me on the thing that it is a good thing.
Okay.
And again, you are leveraging trust.
Right.
He didn't have any before, well, it's not going to work. He had some. You have a good chance that people go like, okay, I'm so curious and mad that you didn't tell me, but I don't understand why you can't tell me. And that makes sense.
I guess here, what it really depends on is the reliability in long term, right? The building trust over time and being consistent into when I say I can't answer that now, but I can answer later, they will actually give the answer later, for example. Or if they can answer, they will just share the answer, even if it's unpleasant or whatever.
Absolutely. You've just nailed it. And there's the consistency, right? I mean, if I tell you, like, I can't tell you, and this is the reason why, but I will tell you whatever that's possible, but then I don't. It doesn't matter why. If I forgot, didn't write it down, don't want to, it doesn't matter. The destruction it will bring about is the same.
Yeah. Never make promises you can't keep.
Or don't want to fulfill.
Or, yeah. So we mentioned a couple things that can happen or can go wrong when when leaders or HR announce or communicate change.
Sure.
You mentioned being explicit about the whys at the beginning. What other mistakes you've noticed in your practice that HR or leadership makes when communicating change?
Very often it's the case that we are communicating at moments where people are not prepared for it. So we have already made some mistakes in the pre-planning phase, which is the most crucial one. Usually this is where changes go wrong, right? We don't do a good job at mapping out needs, mapping out capacities, mapping out skills that would be required of the people, and the change already implementing. And usually we're talking about larger organizations. It's a change that comes from somewhere higher up. So you can't really do anything about it. You have to implement it. It could be change of a system that you're using or whatnot. There's a global push for one system, so you have to make do with whatever you have. But we haven't done a really good job at scoping out the environment, and we haven't talked to people what needs to be done in order for them to be okay implementing the change. And this again goes back to communication. Because people will naturally resist change when they don't understand it, when it's a change for the worse, even when it's a change for the better, but they are not certain about it. Because when you think about changes and behaviors of people, most people behave optimally, at least in their brains. So when you change my surroundings, it makes it difficult for me to be successful in that surrounding because I can't keep doing the same thing over, which I was really good at, right? And I had input A and I got result B. Result B is the good result. That's what I want to desire. So ergo, I'm good at this. But if you change the input A and you change the output B, then it may make me wonder, if I do this, will I be successful? And if that's something that is part of my DNA, or if that's the way I actually see myself internally, or I value external validation, that could be a problem. So again, we go back to this idea of you need to communicate it very well. You need to map out the needs. And very often you'll realize that when you're implementing the change at that given moment, people do not have the capacity to change. You don't have time. You don't have the tools. So it's about what do we need to get them? What's the minimal amount of things we need to get them for them to feel not great? That's not going to happen, but like, okay, we can do this.
So maybe not having the expectations that everyone will be like, hey, let's do this, and being all excited.
5% of the population at most.
Okay.
Unless it's like change for the better, something that everyone earned, and you're like, here you go, and it was like, yeah, this is great. Yeah, I mean that's gonna happen, sure, but in most cases we talk about systemic changes. No,
Right.
unlikely.
Right. So having the kind of a goal more of, as you said, like feeling okay with it and setting people for going through the change without too much backlash or counter pressure.
Yeah. Maybe we should be shooting for people feeling okayish in a way that they don't have this negative, like really negative, frustrated emotions about it. They might not feel great about it, but they feel at least either competent or equipped or cared for enough. So they feel like we can do this somehow. It will be great, but or it will be difficult, but we can do this.
Okay. So what I'm hearing in the mapping phase, when we're actually planning the change, it's good to plan for mapping the needs and mapping the needs during the change and how we can support the people walking through the stages and then the aftercare.
And it's not just that; it's also the effectiveness of people, right? So imagine you change a system of how you operate internally. Let's say it's some sort of a CRM or whatnot. It doesn't matter. It's some system that you input data in, and any change to a different system. Internally, they are very similar very often, but externally, when on the side of the user, they might have buttons different places, so they might have different sequences of things you need to do. And then you were used to doing it in one way, and you are very fast or very good at this, and suddenly you are in this unmapped territory. It's almost like on a ship, back in the 17th, 18th century, when you were like sort of like, well, we go this way and see what happens. Well, everyone's so adventurous. So you're sitting in front of a computer and you click on something and thinking like, what do I do next? They say, oh, well, we gave you this training. Yeah, it was like half a year ago before we even see the system live. And then you're like, oh, right, that makes sense. So these are the moments where you will feel some contempt from people, some distancing, some resistance. And if your reaction to it is like, oh, that's your problem, you need to change your mindset, then you are looking at it from the very wrong perspective. Because if you want people to be at least partially successful, at least okay, you need to ask yourself the question, like, what do I need to do so for them, it is easy to navigate, easy to survive, easy to work with. Not like, I can't ask people to change. I need to provide a space into which they can change. If you get my meaning here.
Yeah. So kind of expect the confusion, expect there will be chaos, expect that the productivity will go lower for some time because, there's a learning phase.
It might. I was just having a discussion with one CEO who was implementing some changes into his agency, like 80 people. And he was surprised and annoyed by the fact that he has to explain the reason for change like over and over again, and that people forget about it or lose the meaning of the change within a couple of days. And he was like, oh, isn't it like with children? And I said, no, it's not with children. That's your job to do this. Your job is to go around, continuously ask, how is it going? And continuously remind people, why are we doing this? And what's the impact in the long term? Because if we're changing something because you wanted it, and you haven't done a good job at explaining why we need it and why should I care? He was not happy with my answer, obviously. That's the way it is.
Right. So maybe going back to your example of changing the internal system, suddenly all the buttons are in the wrong places. So it's like normalizing that, people get, people lose the vision because they're looking for the right button, right? You can't focus on the why we're all doing this in the big picture if you need to find a way to print a document that was so easy to do just a month ago.
Yeah. So you're wasting time. Maybe you're getting annoyed. So you're having some emotions. Those emotions will most likely make you less efficient, right? Imagine, let's combine it with heavy workload. Let's say it's a high season. Lots of clients want things, or things are broken all the time. And suddenly it's not that easy, because you have this extra amount of energy that you need to give and concentrate and focus on the actual change implementations and somehow surviving and navigating this new landscape. But the other work has not gone away. You still have to do it.
That's such a great point, because maybe what sometimes leaders don't realize is that the change is not that you're just going from one thing to another, but you're putting the new thing on top of the old, and it's just double work for some time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, okay, we've implemented a change. Done, right? It's not that simple. It's not like flipping on and off switch for a light bulb. It's just not going to work like that. But sometimes we have really simplified, like views of things, these constructs we build in our heads, and most humans cannot comprehend that systemic thinking. The systems are much more complex than what they seem to be. And that's incrementally true as you go into more and more complex organizations. It's much easier to implement a change in a group of 10 people than it is in a group of 100. And it's not 10 times more difficult to do it in a group of 1,000. It's much more than that. Because systems in which these people operate are multidimensional. It's multi-layered systems. So going from 10 to 100 to 1,000, it's a very different journey.
Wow. Sounds like a big scale.
And it is. And at the same time, then you have people who are individuals within those large organizations, and they don't understand why something changed. And from their perspective, it looks silly or useless, or that makes no sense, or it's a waste of time and money. And they are probably right from their point of view. Plus, you can justify it internally in your head and make it very rational. But if someone took the time to actually explain the systemic impact of that change, you might realize, right, this change has nothing to do with me and my job, but it is very much connected to our business model. And without it, my job and along all the other jobs will not be here in the next 3-4 years. Maybe I don't care, and that's fine. I mean, you don't have to care if you don't want to, but maybe some people will care. Maybe it will have an impact on your family because everyone works at that company, or it's the only employer, miles around you, or it generates 3% of the GDP and it will impact everyone in the country. There might be some reasons why I care, but I'm just saying that the higher you are and the more involved you are in the change from the systems change, the more you expect people to see the same thing. But in reality, they don't, and they can't almost all the time. And you can't really blame them for not being able to. And the least thing you could do, or you should do, is be angry with them because of that. It makes absolute no sense, even though it's a very human thing to do.
Thank you for saying that, because sometimes it can be also frustrating for the leaders to have to, as you mentioned earlier, to have to explain the change and the why again and again. But taking it as a part of the process and a part of the role, what I'm hearing is necessary.
Absolutely.
Well, that's a quite nice bridging to the next part of the episode, where I would like to now do a little demo with you, Šimon, and show how this communication can look like when there's a manager or a person coming up to an HR professional who needs to communicate the change. But of course, the employee doesn't have this whole systemic view, and it's just pretty much asking questions, maybe with some emotions or with some specific expectations. Right. So let's say that we're talking about a major change. We mentioned system change, so maybe some internal system change. And then there's a manager coming up to you, an HR professional, and with a series of comments or questions. So first one would be, this is the first time I'm hearing about this. Why wasn't I involved earlier?
common. If that happens, we've already made a lot of bad impact, right? So we need to do some some fire management here. I would say something along the lines of that is definitely something that should not have happened. That is a mistake. We need to, I'm not going to apologize for it because damage is done. But what I would like to hear from you right now, because there's nothing we can do about not changing the change. Change is here. But what I would like to hear is your perspective. What can we do together to make it happen within your department?
Okay. I really, really like how you did not apologize for whatever happened. As you said, whatever happened. And
I'll fix it.
yeah, but
You can only fix it with the forward thinking, not with the backward thinking.
Right. But still you acknowledge it for what it is. And it was a mistake.
Oh yeah. Validation is one of the key things you have in your tool belt, right? So when someone comes to you and says like, I'm not happy with something, that's a problem, shows you emotions. The worst thing you can do is start arguing with that or telling them they're not feeling that, or that's not the correct way to feel. Even though if you believe that's true, it will not help with anything. You will just make it so much harder for you to get them into this cooperative mode, right? So validation is your number one tool you should be using all the time.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. It's so important. Okay. Well, let's start another comment. Again, from a manager. So I don't think my team will accept this. They're already overloaded.
Absolutely get it, right? I mean, I look at your team, their utility is really, really high. Let me ask you this way. In an ideal world, what would take us to get your team to a position where they, I'm not going to say agree 100%, but they would be more positively, right, looking at this potential change? What would need us to get there?
Okay. Well, I can imagine maybe having a timeline of what's going to happen when, to plan priorities.
I can also imagine maybe they are doing some things that they don't have to be doing, right? Before we put more stuff on them, and we can take some stuff away potentially. Maybe we can do it better, faster. Depends. The thing is, when someone comes with immediate resistance, right, and you start pushing, it will not work. So what we need to do, we need to reframe the whole mindset from, we're not going to do this, we don't have time, capacity, whatnot. We need to go into like, imagine we did. What are some of the things we could have done or we could do for this to work? So what we're doing is we're looking at it like backwards. But from the future back, right? That's one ways we can get around this, like heavily resisting mindset. The second thing is, if you have a team that's really, really struggling capacity-wise, they're like stretched really thin, they will not be able to help you out. They need some pampering first, right? So we need to figure out, well, what can we do to deload you a little bit for this to work? So again, if these comments are real, by the way, we hear them all the time. But when people come with these comments, it already means we have made some mistakes at the very beginning in the preparation phase or the pre-planning phase, because these comments should not come, but they do all the time.
Right. So maybe it could happen that even though that we planned for the teams, we prepared them, that this will happen, that priorities will have to change, it still maybe feels too heavy at the moment, and we just have to deal with it.
Or we told them this is gonna come in like 6 months or 5 months, but in their reality they maybe live, and there's nothing wrong with that. They live like day to day or week to week. That's their operational timeline. So what happened in 6 months is like, sure, that looks important, but in a week it's gone. And then it happens, and they're like, they're like shocked. But I told you like a half year ago, oh no, that's not true, we forgot, blah, blah, blah. There's some other reasons, yeah. Again, it only shows that we cannot put the pressure and the mistake on the side of the receivers and the change doers. We need to put it on the side of those who are preparing the change. Because we are responsible for that.
I like how you switched it into the positive thinking, right? So kind of let's think together to find a way to find a solution, make this work.
I mean, you can always apply your hard power, right? Saying, well, I'm the boss. And I told you you're going to do this, or the company said you're going to do it, so you're going to do it if you want to keep this job. That works to a certain degree, not with everyone, not in every culture. It kind of works short term. But what does it do very well is the long-term trust building. This is where it goes really over. So.
Right. It's like the body and the organization can stay in kind of a survival mode overload for some time, but it's definitely not something that you want to be in for long term.
And again, you can comment on it and say, like, we are in a, for a better, lack of words, like wartime or crisis time. And for that, we have these policies, and this is how we're going to do things in a couple of weeks. And this is the reason. And again, you can be very transparent about it. What shouldn't happen is we have never used this policy before of direct orders, for example, right? And then we do it and people are shocked because they have never experienced it. Maybe they were used to making decisions in team levels, so much more democratic. And suddenly someone says no, this is how it's going to be. But you have to also say the A, which is we are in a wartime or crisis time. We need to fix this and this and this, and this is happening and that. So again, we go back to communication.
Absolutely. All right, let's do one more.
Sure.
And we'll end up there. So honestly, I don't see why this change is necessary right now.
That's a really good one. Thank you. You're not the only one saying that. So what I would like to do is to validate your point of view and make sure I understand where you're coming from. So what are some of the aspects of this change that you feel do not make any sense at this point?
That now we have so much work, or we have these kind of priorities. It's just not the right time now.
I understand. Let me just paint the other side of the picture, which is if we do not implement this change now, we have data and models that show it in 8 to 9 months' time, we will start losing about 10% of revenue every day. Every day, not every week, not every month, every day. Right? In other words, our business model stopped working. We don't feel the impact yet, but we will very soon. And this change is here for one reason and one reason only, to keep us afloat. So my question to you is, how can you help me put this forward?
Okay. Again, forward thinking, being on the same boat, solution thinking.
And sometimes you need to be brutally honest if you can. Sometimes you can't because, that data is top secret or whatnot. But if you can share things and you can be very honest, and it's not scaremongering or anything like that, it's reality. It is a good idea to know that the business or the ways we were doing things now kind of stop working. If we do not get out of this, but I don't want to change, I don't feel it's necessary. No, actually, if we don't change, we're out. Then there is not much space left, right?
Okay. Sounds again like something we need to plan before, and it goes with the why. Yeah, why the change is needed and what is the impact of not changing, which is also something you mentioned at the beginning.
And if I can comment, add one more thing here, which is very important. Sometimes in large organizations, multinational global organizations, there are changes that make absolutely zero sense. And you have to implement them. They make sense on the global level or within certain markets, but with your market or your level, it makes no sense. And this comes back to why are we doing this? It makes no sense. Well, the question is this a feature of the system? In other words, that's something that we have no power and control over. The answer is yes. In that case, all we can do about this is change the thinking, how we think about this. Because there is no power we have no power to change it. We have no power to say no. If we keep entrenching ourselves in this negativity, it will also start affecting our actionability, our efficiency, everything, our communication. So what we can really do is, can we offer some suggestions? Okay. Can we make them into reality? He says no. In that case, the third question is, can we live with this? And most people will Yeah, fine. It's not such a big deal,
Hmm.
right? Unless it's value clash.
Uh-huh.
Maybe the company has shifted to a different field of business, and you're like, no, I'm going to be part of this. It's a different story. But most people get really caught in this emotional frustration level where they are continuously moaning about something. But when you ask them this question, like, can you give some suggestions? Are these suggestions doable within the scope of the work system? The answer is no. Can you live with this? Most people are going to go like, yeah,
Mm,
well, then live with it and let it go.
right. Like, don't get
Focus on things
stuck.
you can actually influence, right?
Yeah. Mm,
And this is especially true for like Central Europe, the Czechs, Slovaks, Poles. We have this tendency to get caught up in this negativity about things we cannot change. And that really decreases people's actual ability.
hmm.
And it's a shame.
Right. Because it doesn't help, right? If you can't change it, but you don't want to leave, then
Yeah. I mean, I can understand that you are frustrated and there is some healthy point to getting it off your chest, right?
mm,
But if you're doing that every single day with every single person, including you internally, that will make you feel really miserable after a while. And that will just also make you blind to all the other things that you maybe like or enjoy about this work, job, team, whatever. And after a while, all you will see is this negativity. Okay. That will not only make you miserable, but also all the people around you miserable. So it's probably not the best route to go down to.
mm, okay. Well, thank you so much for these practical examples, how it can look like when people are resisting change or people have trouble with this implementation of change. And from what I heard, the best thing is to make sure that we prepare as perfectly as possible the why, the what is the cost of not going through the change, preparing
yeah.
for the chaos, preparing for supporting the people through the change, and having the mindset of people don't have to agree with it necessarily. They don't have to be excited about it for sure, but we need them to be okay with it at least. And maybe in
Absolutely.
hindsight, it will be better. Mm,
True. You've just perfectly summarized it.
thank you. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Shimon, for sharing all your wisdom and experience. And I'm
It was a
curious, I'm curious if you could share with us and with our listeners, how can they reach out to you and your company and to get to know more about your work?
Sure. Thanks. So I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn handle is my name. So Šimon Steffal or Šimon Steffal both work. You can just Google my name and it will probably get you to LinkedIn immediately. I'm also active on Instagram. So you can find me there under the handle Simon_Mindset Mentors. That's my company name. And finally, if you want to have a look at our website, it's at www.mindsetmentors.eu. So you'll find our services and everything we do there. We also have a blog and a newsletter, currently only in Czech. But you can use AI to translate almost everything nowadays. So that should not be a problem.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm going to put all the links in the description so everyone can find you easily.
Awesome.
Thank you again for a great episode,
Welcome.
conversation, and have a great day.
You too. Thank you very much.
If you are an HR professional who wants a safe space to practice speaking in English, join our Confident HR Speaker community. We meet twice a month to discuss real HR topics, expand our vocabulary, and gain the confidence to express ourselves. Plus, you'll be supported and inspired by a group of other HR professionals who share your struggles and goals. Check the link in the description to sign up. Bye-bye.